Welcome to a series of grammar lectures on Biblical Hebrew. Today we'll be looking at the consonants. This is where we're headed. There are quite a few points, but this is everything you need to know about the Hebrew alphabet, the Alef Bet. This is the Alef Bet, all 23 consonants, written from right to left and from top to bottom. Before we begin, let me say that I am teaching you Biblical Hebrew, but as is common these days, I'll be using modern pronunciation. As we go through these letters one at a time, I want you to notice that although the letter may look strange, very few of these letters will actually sound strange. There are very few new sounds for you as a native English speaker to learn with learning Hebrew. First up is Aleph, and Aleph is one of those different letters which doesn't actually have a pronunciation. You see it, you notice it, but you don't actually pronounce it, just the vowel that corresponds to it, but we'll address vowels in the next lecture. Aleph is silent. Next is Bet, and Bet says B as in boy. Gimel says G as in goat. Dalet says D as in dog. He says H as in hat. A Vav says V as in vase. A Zayin says Z as in zoo. A Chet, this is one of those other different letters. A Chet says Ch as in Bach. So it's kind of like you're clearing the back of your mouth. A Chet says Ch as in Bach. A Tet says T as in toy. A Yod says Y as in yak. A Kaf says K as in key. A Lamed says L as in lake. A Mem says M as in man. A Nun says N as in noon. A Samech says S as in seed. An Ayin is another silent letter. A Pe says P as in pie. A Tzadi says Ts as in cats. A Kof says K as in key. A Resh says R as in ring. Now this is an R sound, but it's not like the English R where it's pronounced with like the middle or front of your tongue. It's actually pronounced with the back of your tongue. If you raise the back of your tongue up to the roof of your mouth, that's more how you pronounce it. R, R. A Resh says R. A Sin says S as in seed. This is tricky. That dot on the left is about to change to the right. And now it is a Shin that says Sh as in shed. And finally, a Tav says T as in toy. The 23 consonants of the Alef Bet. Next, we'll look at a subset of the Alef Bet, a group of letters mnemonically referred to as BeGaD KeFaT letters. You may have noticed that some of the letters took a dot inside of them. We call that dot a dagesh. There are 6 of these letters, and at least in biblical times, when these letters lacked the dagesh, the lack of dagesh indicated an alternate pronunciation. But with modern Hebrew, we pronounce 3 of these the same, whether or not they have the dagesh. So a Gimel always says G, a Dalet always says D, and a Tav always says T. But for the other 3, the lack of dagesh does indicate an alternate pronunciation. So a Bet without the dagesh says V as in vase. A Kaf without the dagesh says Ch as in Bach. And Pe without the dagesh says F as in fish. Now I want you to notice something with me, a consistent difference between the sounds here and the sounds here. The letters that have a dagesh have a hard, point-like pronunciation. You can't hold it. It's just a momentary sound, and it's a hard sound. So a b, a k, and a p. But for these three letters, when they lack the dagesh, they get a softer sound, a sound that you can maintain. V, a ch, and a f. You can hold those three sounds for as long as you have breath. So that's the BeGaD KeFaT letters. Three of them have an alternate pronunciation when they lack the dagesh. Next up is another subset of the Alef Bet, a group of letters that have what's called a Sofit form. A Sofit is the Hebrew word, means final, and for these 5 letters, when they're written at the beginning or middle of a word, they get the regular form, but if it occurs at the end of the word, it gets the Sofit form. And if you think about it, this is kind of the inverse of English, what we do with capital letters. So you have somebody named Bob, and convention is when we write out Bob, we write the first B with a capital B, and anything else we use a lowercase. For Hebrew, it's the opposite. When these letters occur at the beginning or middle, it's the regular form. At the end, it's the Sofit form. Let's look at these one at a time. First up is Kaf. Here's the regular form. And to form the Sofit, what you can basically do is you take this horizontal line, pull it straight, and you have an extra long line for your Kaf Sofit. Next up is Mem. That little trick doesn't work here. The Mem Sofit is just a nice little square. Next up is Nun, and Nun, the trick does work. The horizontal line, you pull it straight, and there you have derived your Nun Sofit. Next up is Pei, your horizontal line, you pull it straight, and there's your Pei Sofit. Next up is Tzadi, you have your horizontal line, pull it straight, and there's basically your Tzadi Sofit. So 5 letters have an alternate form for when they occur at the end of the word. It's not a pronunciation thing, it's just a writing convention. Next, we'll look at a whole group of letters that students, when they begin, get them confused quite easily. Let's look at these letters one pair at a time. First up is Bet, says B, and Kaf says K. The Bet has this bump. The line extends here, whereas the Kaf is just a nice little curve. Next is Gimel, says G, and the differentiation is the Gimel has this high heel bottom, whereas the Nun says N has a square bottom. Next is He, says H, and there's this break here, whereas the Chet says Ch, and the line here touches. We have again the Chet, and it's just a full straight line, but the Tav says T. The line goes down, but then juts leftward. Here's the Sheen and the Seen, and one way to remember this, a little mnemonic, is committing a sin is never right. Now, if we pronounce sin like the Hebrew word seen, you say it in a little different voice, seen is never right, because the dot is always on the left. The dot on the sheen is on the right. A Mem Sofit says M has this square bottom, but a Samech says S has a rounded bottom. A Dalet says D has a full-length vertical line. A Kaf Sofit says K has an extra long line right here. The Dalet says D. The top line extends rightward, whereas the Resh says R has a curve. Next is Tzadi, says Ts, and it has this 45-degree angle here, whereas the Ayin, the silent letter, just has the whole curve. There are a couple other differences, but that's a big one between these two letters. Next is Zayin says Z. The top line is a full crossing slant, whereas the Vav says V is just a hook leftward. The Vav says V. The line is full length, whereas the Yod says Y is just a half length on the top. We have the Vav again says V, full length, whereas the Nun Sofit is extra long. Nun Sofit says N. Those were all the lookalikes. Now with modern pronunciation, we have a whole bunch of pairs of sound the sames. And this is just with modern pronunciation. Back in biblical times, every single letter was pronounced differently from all the others. So no two forms ever sounded the same. With modern, there's several pairs that do. First pair is Aleph and Ayin, are those silent letters. Next is Bet, critically without the dagesh, and Vav, both say V, as in vase. A Chet and a Kaf without the dagesh, both say Ch, as in Bach. A Tet and a Tav, whether or not that Tav has the dagesh, both of these letters say T, as in toy. A Kaf with the dagesh and a Kof, both say K, as in key. And a Samech and a Sin, both say S, as in seed. Next, there's a group of letters called the Gutturals. There are 4 letters, an Aleph, Ayin, He, and Chet, and these letters were originally pronounced in the back of the throat. And it's good to know of this class, that it's called Gutturals, that there's 4 of them, and that they're Aleph, Ayin, He, and Chet, because these letters act uniformly in several unique ways from the rest of the consonants. But right now, it's important just to point out that there is this class, and it consists of these 4 letters. Finally, we have how do you write these letters? So this is how the Alef Bet is written from right to left. This is how you would see it typed. It's a fancy font with those serifs. If you tried to mimic this style, it would take you quite a long time to write each letter. So the convention with handwriting is something much closer to this font. As far as how you would write these forms, I have a worksheet with each letter one at a time with strokes, which stroke you do first, how many strokes, where you begin, where you end each stroke. Let me end by pointing out another way to remember a Sin and a Sheen. If you write out the Alef Bet right to left and you do Sin and then Sheen, your dots will touch here in the middle. All right, there it is, everything you need to know about the Alef Bet.